So one of the things you can do when you're assessing deals is leverage AI to learn about a market. Now, there's plenty of websites out there that will give you great information. Niche.com, for example, will give you a nice general overview, so to speak, of a market. You can go to places like Neighborhood Scout, and then there's different sites for schools that'll tell you crime, right? And there's all these different sites. The nice thing about AI is you can actually tell it to look at some of those sites, or you can tell it to just go out there and find its own sites to aggregate some of that information to give you an idea about where a deal is located. In today's virtual world, it's very common to receive deals in all these places, many of which you may have never even been to because virtual investing is as popular as it's ever been. But if you've never been there, how can you learn about it? You can leverage AI. Sure, you can do it manually, but AI can speed this process up and give you some quick ideas. For example, I have over here on the right side of me where I actually told it to compare two towns that were side by side. Okay, now this is in a market that I am familiar with, but I was curious if I wasn't there and I wanted to learn about these two markets to say, do I buy a rental property here or do I buy it here? Which one do I do? And so I pulled it up and it actually even created me a chart along with giving me some general info about each. But it told me some cool things that I didn't think about. And it was like the population trend since 2020. Well, that was 6 years ago. And it's like, well, one is up and the other is down. So that is actually good information to know. The population's decreasing. Guess what? Other things might be decreasing as well. And it's good to know that. The one with the population increasing, probably a better place to go. Okay. It talks about median household income. It talked about median owner occupied home value, rents, but it also talked about what's the poverty rate, what's the crime rate, what's the quality, again, of the schools. And then it even told me this particular area is more general, like a lot of it's fairly similar, but this other area is much more street to street. So even though it's quote unquote a little better on paper, do your due diligence because you got to make sure you're in the right neighborhood on the right street. And I love it because what it's really doing is it's telling me a bit about risk. And anytime you're buying a deal, whether you're going to wholesale it, keep it for rental, flip, doesn't matter. What you really want to know is what are my risks? What are the things that I don't know that can hurt me? Okay, anybody can send you a deal. You can find any deal online, but what's typically not given to you in the sales pitch is what are the risks, in particular, the intangible risks that are not captured on a spreadsheet. And this is important because a deal can look great on paper, and just one intangible risk can blow the whole thing up. And I'll give you one example before we wrap up. Many years ago, we bought a property in downtown Atlanta. And when we bought it, it was winter. So guess what happens? Nobody's outside because it's 30 degrees, 40, 20, whatever. We do a rehab, beautiful project. We go to market in spring, probably I want to say it was April, May timeframe. And we had a new problem that didn't show up on any spreadsheet. It didn't show up on any risk analysis. It showed up nowhere. And that's a few doors down. There was a bunch of fellas, that's the word I just call them the fellas, hanging out up front. Out, yeah, they just sat on the porch every day. They weren't particularly loud, but they looked like they might be participating in a little bit of smoke heavy activity. Was it all legal or not? I don't know. We didn't ask questions. Here's what I do know. When buyers went to that property, they saw that down the street and they said, I don't think this is a street I want to be on. That's a risk. That is a risk that you can't capture that in a sheet. Okay. You can't capture it. I didn't know. Nobody told me, hey, on some of these streets, there can be some questionable things going on, right? And nobody has to ask. All you need is your buyer to show up, see something that looks questionable. they're gone. They're out the door. And when you're into a flip where you spent six figures and you spent six figures on a rehab and you're trying to sell it, that's not a good place to be because it's a risk that maybe could have been mitigated a little bit better. Now, back when we didn't have AI, back when we did this deal, nowadays I will ask some of these questions. Hey, what is the risk of this kind of activity, this kind of activity, this kind of activity? Because I want to reduce risk as much as possible. And so it's one of the beautiful, cool things you can do with AI is start digging into some very specific types of risk analysis when doing deals so that you can make sure that it doesn't just check all the boxes, it doesn't just work on the spreadsheet, but it handles as many intangibles as possible so you have the highest chance of success. So, hope you found this helpful. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I will see you around.